Sorry about that. I had to break that into two pieces. So it's very important that you identify the problems in your household or with yourself. Like I had to identify what my actual disabilities are, when they started, what was the root cause of it, what was going on around me when it was happening. And by doing that, and also getting factual information, facts, not some made up theory, not my opinion, something like, okay, I was given extra Epicac. I saw the cup get filled all the way to the top. I've researched how much Epicac should be given at any given time. And my mother, on more than one occasion, has admitted to giving me extra Epicac, and she doesn't care who knows. So that's a fact. That's not my opinion. I wish it wasn't a fact. I mean, I don't want to, nobody wants to talk about this stuff. It's very hard for people to talk about traumatic stuff. This is not easy for me. I'm sure that my nephew doesn't want to talk about this. I'm sure my brother doesn't want to talk about this. And my father is in such deep denial that he definitely won't talk about it. If you ask him to talk about my issues, talk about my drug addiction, he'll go up and down for an hour. Oh, Zach likes this drug and he did this drug and he stole this. But then if you ask, okay, did your mother ever, did his mother or your wife ever steal something? He won't want to talk about that. He'll just say no. If you ask him, oh, did your wife or Zach's mother ever administer medications or take Zach's medication? He'll say no, he doesn't want to talk about it, but that would be a lie. He knows. He was there when she was taking pills out of my medication. She was taking my medication. Well, that's a bad, bad thing, and he knows that's a fact. He was there, he saw it, she admitted it to us, and she acted like it was no big deal, but that he won't want to talk about that. He'll want to talk about me taking her medication, but he will never want to talk about her taking my medication. And that's what they call a double standard. Now, how about mental illness? If you ask him about my mental illness, he'll call me crazy, stupid, disabled, non-intelligent. He'll say that I was bipolar, depressed, suicidal, all these type of things. Meanwhile, he has no factual evidence to go with that. And he might quote a couple doctors that my mother gave bad information to. I mean, it's not that hard. If you take a 10-year-old or a 7-year-old to the doctor and you tell him beforehand, Zach, make sure that you tell the doctor that you're depressed and tired. Make sure you tell the doctor about those suicidal thoughts. And then you don't connect it with the medications that have things like suicidal thoughts or depression. You can easily doctor shop in that way. There's a word for that. What my mother was doing is she was doctor shopping. She had what she wanted me to be, and she was looking for the right doctor that would go along with her narrative. That is not proof. A doctor is only as good as the information you give him, and none of this information came from me. It all came from my mother. Every single diagnosis before even 18, we'll say 18, was all based off my mother's narratives and my mother's information. But she also wasn't looking at the side effects of my medication. She wasn't discussing things with me. She had me in programs that was moving me all over the country. They didn't even talk about the schools. We didn't even have full conversations about what was going on in the schools. When I mentioned that my school wasn't having classes for a whole year, nothing got done. They just called the school, and then I got punished in a horrible way for speaking the truth. That's usually what happens. You speak the truth, somebody doesn't like it, and then they punish you. That happens quite a bit. It's probably going to happen to me again as I speak about these issues. My father wants to protect his money, and his new third wife wants to protect their money. So they're just going to try to get me hurt again. They're going to double down on hurting me. That's what they're going to do. They're going to call me crazy, psychotic. They're going to try to get drugs put in my body again. They're going to fuck up my medical care. Most likely that's what's going to happen if they get involved and they're not doing the right thing. The right thing is to have conversations with me and identify the problems that you know are true. Like my father knows my mother took my medication. He was there. Now that was only Vicodin and some opiates, but still that shows her mindset. That shows that she's willing to take other people's medications. He knows, or many people know, that she gave me extra Ipecac. That's a serious problem. I was speaking up in front of him at the doctor's about this overdose that happened to me in Westford. All these things were mentioned. He saw many, if you ask him, does Zach act crazy? He would probably tell you a bunch of crap. But, oh, yes, this. But if you ask him, does your wife act crazy? He'll say no. But guess what? If you ask my brother, who's 60, he'll tell you absolutely. If you ask my nephew, he'll say, oh, yeah, she was doing crazy, weird, and unusual things. If you ask me, I can give you clear proof that she was acting unstable. Absolutely. Calling me an animal. Like, literally, no, you're no better than a dog, trying to treat me like an animal. She would also make these crazy rants. She would blame her alcohol abuse on me. She would blame her therapy on me. If she had to go to therapy, it was my fault. If she drank a bottle in the basement, it was my fault. Everything. If I went over to a friend's house and asked her permission to do so, and she yepped me and gave me permission, and then she forgot or she wasn't paying attention, that's my fault. I ran away. No, I never ran away. No, I had a friend waiting in the damn driveway. I came inside. I asked if I could go to a friend's house. You gave me permission. I went to a friend's house, and then you went up and down the street screaming like a maniac. When my friend walked me out of the house, you screamed and acted so psychotic. And after all that, because my friend knew that I asked for permission, he was there. He was there. I asked for permission to see a friend. Did I ever get to see this friend again? No. And when I asked him, why don't you want to come over? He said, your mother seems crazy. Your mother seems psychotic. This was a very common occurrence where I would invite friends over or people would meet my mother and then they would say, oh, you poor soul. Oh my God, you have to deal with that. Same thing with the schools. My mother and my schools would talk back and forth in notes. A lot of times the school would give a compliment about me, say Zach's doing a wonderful job, he did this, and this. And then my mother would go on a psychotic rant on paper, and then I would get to school the next day, and my teachers would say, you poor kid, oh my God, what is your mother doing? This is totally psychotic. We gotta make a phone call about this. And then her and the schools would get in a screaming match over the phone because she's acting psychotic and the schools are realizing it. But then I changed schools and changed schools and changed schools. But would he admit that any of this was going on? No. He'll only want to talk about me. He'll want to blame everything on me. If you ask him to describe what was going on inside his household without putting any blame on me, he won't be able to do it. Because all he wants to do is blame me. Why were there so many medications in Zach's body? Oh, it's Zach's fault. Had nothing to do with the fact that my mother was doctor shopping and pushing a narrative. Nothing to do with that. It's all Zach's fault. If you ask about the drinking, was your mother was your second wife an alcoholic? Did she have an alcohol problem? Absolutely not, he'll tell you. And then he'll say it's all Zach's fault. Even though when she had 20% of her liver working and was yellow, she went right for the liquor cabinet the minute she came home. She was in drunken rages multiple times. The cops were called and they witnessed her drunk on multiple occasions. I mean, there were multiple occasions where it was very clear she had a drinking problem. Now, I'll admit, my father drinks every day, but he does not have a drinking problem. He controls his alcohol just fine. He drinks every day, but he just acts a little forgetful because of that. So does everybody else. When you drink every day, it affects your brain cells and your memory. That's a fact. But it's not a problem for him. He doesn't get violent. He doesn't get psychotic. He doesn't go into a rage. My father is perfectly capable of drinking every day. But my mother was not. It brought out demons in her and she should have been handled a long time ago. But he will not talk about these things. He has no interest in handling the issue that was going on in his house. He will only try to put the blame on somebody else's child. And there's a reason for that. It's blame the neighbor's kid, blame the dog, blame anybody but your own household, right? Your wife can't be doing anything wrong because she's an angel. I can't be doing anything wrong, even though I've admitted, my father has admitted he hasn't paid attention to what medications I was on. He also was there when I was at the doctor's telling him about that night. He was also there when my mother would act psychotic and mental. He had warnings from other people in the family telling him something might be going on. Other people in the family witnessed her say things like, yes, I gave him extra Ipecac and I don't care who knows about it. These statements are very bad. They're what they call red flags. They should have been addressed. But instead of talking about that, instead of getting us together and talking about my mother's behaviors and my behaviors, they only wanted to take me. They only wanted to blame me. They wanted to take me out of the picture. Well, actually, they wanted to take my mother out of the picture and put everything on me. The doctor shopping, the pharmaceuticals, the physical abuse, all of it put together really affected me, and it still affects me to this day. I have health issues that are going to be permanent, or they are permanent, due to my mother's behaviors, and it needs to be discussed. You cannot let somebody else pay for somebody else's sins. Okay, I'll have to pay for my addiction. I had to do a lot of hard work for that, and I might have some liver problems. I might have hepatitis. I mean, I do have hepatitis, but that might affect me one day. It might affect me one day. It might even, it gives me a little bit of soreness here and there once in a while. But I've been suffering with a disorder for 25 years that has nothing to do with decisions I made. I also suffered greatly during my childhood on multiple drugs I didn't need. And my mother definitely was doctor shopping. She was pushing a narrative for Social Security. She had a plan in her head that she was going with. And there are plenty of subjects that my father was there for, that he could sit down and discuss with me that would help him get a better picture of what was going on. But all he'll want to do is put the blame on me. It's so much easier than taking responsibility. Blame the dog, blame the kid, blame the orphan. I'm going to give you an example now of where that can go wrong. Now, I was watching a show a while ago. There was two children. And two families, okay? You got two households. We'll call it family A, household A, and child A. Then you got family B, household B, and child B, okay? So these two kids are at school, and they find a cat or a dog or something like that. And one of the more problematic children, the one that's having a lot of problems, the one that's really messed up in the head, wants to torture that cat. Oh my God, the worst thing. I mean, I almost wanted to cry. I can't see people do this stuff. I have so much love for animals. I've rehabilitated so many people and animals that when I see that type of stuff, it makes me want to cry. But what's even worse is when the child cannot get help. Now, I am nothing like this, by the way. If anybody ever tries to say I'm like this, no, that's completely the opposite. I am literally like, I take so much abuse and I rehabilitate. I give up my own money and my own time to make animals better and make people better. So I'm quite the opposite. I could never even hurt an ant. I bring ants and insects outside. I don't even want to spray them with bug poison until they get to be like 1,000 ants. Once when there's 1,000 ants, then I want to spray. But when there's one ant, I take a piece of paper, I get underneath them and I bring them outside. Same thing with the stink bugs, same thing with the ladybugs. I bring them outside instead of exterminating them. I don't have a mean body I don't have a mean bone in my body, not at all. But I have been called so many things, and I've been manipulated and had so many narratives and images put onto me, so many labels that aren't true, that I really have to clarify this. I am in no way any of these children, but this show did have a problem in it I'm going to get to. So you have these two kids at a school. One of them finds a cat, and he's kind of evil. He's going through some stuff, and it's not being handled. Then you have another child that's just friends with him. The child that's going through the problems wants to torture this cat on this show. And you got the other child who's just listening. He's blindly listening, just doing whatever he's told. That's another problem. And they get caught. A teacher comes out and catches the really problematic child A, doing something awful to the cat. And then you got child B kind of joining in. So they call the parents, they suspend them, and they send them home. Now, child A, the one that has all the problems, the one that is really going, he wanted to do bad. He wanted to do harm to another creature, what is god awful. I don't know how people could do harm to other creatures like they did to me. I don't know how people could do all this damage to an orphan or hurt children or animals and then think it's okay. You cannot drug or hurt people or animals. It's just wrong. And what was done to me was wrong too, but I'll get back on subject. So, this child got caught for torturing this cat, Child A, on this show on TV. So, the parents do nothing. They do absolutely nothing about this. They just send the kid to the room. So this kid's having some mental problems for sure. I mean, he's hurting other animals. I mean, that's bad. This isn't stepping on an ant. This isn't going, "Hey, look at the ant." This isn't like that. No, this is a cat. This is a grown animal, and they're doing awful things to it. I think they were burning it or something. I can't remember on the show what they were doing. But it was awful. It's god awful. It almost made me cry because these things were done to me. I've had children torture me. I've had parents drug me. I've been used. I've had labels put on me. I've been lied about. So I can feel this. And the way I deal with that is by helping it never happen to other people. I rehabilitate people, animals. I make sure that everybody's safe. Everybody has what they need. And that's how I move on with this. But these things are what happened to me. My mother had a problem. She had a mental illness. And she was doing very bad things to me, hurting me in ways that are permanent. I mean, a full bottle of Ipecac, that's dangerous. You don't give a full bottle of Ipecac to anybody. But anyways, I gotta get to the point. So the children that did this thing, you got one with a mental disorder, and you got one who's a follower. Kid A goes home, the teachers call him, and he gets sent to his room. Okay, so nothing gets done to help that child. Well, on the other side, you got child B, who is the follower. His parents have a whole conversation with him. They say, "Oh, what happened? Oh, Bobby did what? Bobby did what? And you wanted to go with him? Well, we're calling Bobby's parents right now." Okay, so they call Bobby's parents and say they want to hold the meeting and talk to them. So they drive over there. Family B, with Kid B, drives over to see Family A and Kid A. They all go to the living room. They call down Child A. You got Child B and his parents in there. And Child B's parents say, "We think that Bobby is affecting our son's behavior. So we don't want Bobby hanging out with our child anymore. We would like our child, Child B, to be able to move on. We want him to have other friends because something's going on in your household and we don't want our son to be affected by it." Now, Family A has something to handle. Their own son, Son A, has now been torturing animals. That's really, really bad. Just like what my mother did to me was really, really bad. No animal or person should ever have to suffer for another person's decisions. But anyways, so what do these parents do? Do they have a talk with their son and say, "Okay, well, we'll make sure our son doesn't hang out with your son, and we're going to bring our son to therapy. We're going to try to get him the help he needs"? No, on this show, that doesn't happen. What the parents do is they blame no, your son was a bad influence. Your son is the problem. Son B, the following son, the son that's following. The follower son, the son that's, Family B's son, is a follower. And then the family doesn't want to admit that their son has a problem. They can't admit that their son would do such an awful thing, such an evil thing of hurting another creature. I mean, that's awful. You don't hurt other creatures, human or otherwise. It's just wrong. But instead of handling that, instead of identifying that, they just blame it on the other parents. No, it's your son. Your son, Son B, is the problem. Get out of our house. Get out of our house. Get out of our house. So the other family that drove all the way over there to try to help this situation now leaves. They take Son B in their car and they say, you're not to see that anymore. You're not to see this child anymore. And they drive them all the way back home. Well, what's going to happen to Child A? Well, he's sent back to his room. He never gets to go to therapy. They never identify where the root of the cause is. Some people just have real mental disabilities. Like, they tried to put that shit on me one time. I was playing with insects and matches in the back of my yard, and they literally tried to make me out to be like this serial killer, like I was torturing animals, but I obviously wasn't. They were insects. I literally have watched several children burn ants with magnifying glasses. I've watched hundreds. This is very common. And I am nothing like any of this that I was seeing. But here's the part that really gets to me. Here's the part that's the point of all this speech. That child who's having all those issues is not going to get better. Why? Because the parents are the issue. They're ignoring what's going on around them. They are not getting them the help they need. Now, in no way do I need help with anything like this child or this show was going on. But my parents, my father, is ignoring what my mother was doing to me. My mother had a serious mental illness. She was doing serious harm to my body. She was doctor shopping. She was misdiagnosing. She thought that she was some doctor and she could do everything. And my body was getting ruined. I mean, before I was even 8 years old, I've had an overdose from her. I've taken extra Epicac, and I have a permanent esophagus problem. My body is damaged, and I'm only 8. Keep that in mind. And when I bring this up to the doctors, when I bring this up to my father, when I bring this up to my mother, what do? Absolutely nothing. And that's the problem. You can't do nothing. You cannot run away. See, family A is sending their child to the room and not handling it. And the reason why they blamed family B is because it's easier than taking responsibility. The parents have to take responsibility for their actions, as well as the child has to take responsibility for his actions. If the child is hurting animals and cats and things like that, he needs help right away. And the parents need to identify that they might have some responsibilities to deal with. But instead, they blame it on the other family. They say, no, it's your family that has a problem. No, it's yours, so they don't have to deal with it. Now the blame has been put on a different family, so they can say, our son's an angel, our son is so good, even though he has problems in that room. And this is the point I'm making. My mother did awful things to me. Awful. Now, luckily, I went to the helping other way. I became the super spiritual, super religious person who literally will give up his life just to do the right thing. I mean, I've been abused so many times that I feel comfortable in it. I've literally been medicated, abused, hit. I've been stabbed. I've been left out in the cold to freeze to death. I've taken like 100 ambulances from being unconscious where they just find my body someplace. I think we're at actually about 26 of those where I've literally just woken up in the hospital from being unconscious, either frozen with head injuries, seizures, all different types of things. And this has to do with the root of what my mother did to me that wasn't handled. And that's because my father has it so much easier by putting the blame onto me instead of handling the actual problem. Now, I no longer am an addict. I handled my addiction. I handled my financial situation. I work for a living. I have an apartment. I got my own apartment. And my father, did he do any of these things? No. He did not get me that job. He did not help get me that job. Did he try to get me this apartment? No. He did not help me get this apartment. This came from hard work with me working with my community. I would find people who needed help. I would help them. And in return, I would make up plans. Like, for instance, I moved up to New Hampshire because their plans weren't working out. And I came up with a whole plan to save this apartment, and it worked. We're still here 7 or whatever years later. And that's because I worked on it. I did the work necessary. But if I kept on running away and believing in a made-up fantasy, I would have never got better. I would have never been able to handle my addiction. I would have never been able to speak about these things openly. And I would have never, ever been able to explain myself. And now I have seizure medication, which helps me talk too. When I don't take that, I have more trouble explaining these analogies. But see, my father's the type of father that doesn't handle anything. He runs away or puts the blame onto other people. He doesn't want to discuss what his wife might have been doing or what he was doing. He only wants to put the blame onto me or other family members or the schools or the farm. Anybody but him. And that's the problem. You need to discuss things. You need to understand things to move forward. And if you're saying that your son has all these problems, but then not identifying any of your wife's problems, then there's nothing you can really do to help the situation, because you got to get at the root cause. And seeing as I was drugged before I was even 8 years old, seeing as I was given full bottles of Epicac, seeing as I was given an overdose of a cocktail of medication and there was no ambulance called. And whenever I brought this up to the doctors in front of them, they first called it an allergy, then they told me to shut up, then she got mad at me, told me to shut up some more, and then I was told, well, if I say jump, you tell me how high. And then when I brought up the side effects of the medication or some of my problems, she used to tell me, don't blame the meds. But I'm having heart palpitations and headaches in the morning, and I feel nauseous, and I feel suicidal and depressed. No, 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 don't blame the meds. We'll blame it on you at the doctor's to get you more medication, is what she did. Well, that's a serious problem. And once when you identify what was going on in Westford, then you can understand what happened in Texas. Once when you understand what happened in Texas, then you can understand what happened in New Mexico. Once when you understand what happened in New Mexico, you can understand what happened in Maine. Once when you understand what happened in Maine, you can understand what happened in Mass. Once when you understand what happened in Mass, then you can understand what's happening now in New Hampshire. But if you deny all of it, if you just want to put blame on somebody else, then you can't understand any of it, as well as you'll continue harming other people. You need to understand the situation, and that's what I'm trying to get at. My father has never identified the problems with my mother, and he never properly identified anything with me. He didn't have discussions with me. They didn't take anything I was saying about my body seriously, and my mother's fantasies is all that ever got put down. My mother would make up this narrative for Social Security like I'm schizophrenic and then try to push it. That's a fact. She came up to me several times from the age of, I don't know, about 9 all the way to 16, somewhere around there, several times pushing the schizophrenic narrative. I would not go along with it. She wanted me to be schizophrenic, but I was not, so I didn't go along with it. But if I had gone along with it then, at age 9, 12, 13, 15, 16, if I had, still to this day, I would have had records saying that I was on schizophrenic medication, and I would have had diagnoses of schizophrenia, because my mother was already telling me, just tell them you hear voices, just tell them you hear voices. Well, you're schizophrenic and you need to tell the doctor you're schizophrenic, is what she used to tell me. Well, that's a big problem. She's making up a narrative and she wants me to repeat her narrative, and I did that a lot with her. There's a lot of misdiagnosing, there's a lot of information that wasn't being passed on, as well as I'm being moved along, so I'm not building any trust with anybody to have these conversations with anybody. It's not like, I'm being moved every year to a new location. The teachers are starting to see it, well, now I got a new school. Well, the doctor's starting to see it, well, now I have a new doctor. And then my mother, while I'm in school, calls the doctor. Whatever she says gets put in the stone. Well, that's a big problem that needs to be identified. And my mother's drinking needed to be identified. The fact that she was blaming her therapy, her alcohol abuse, blaming all her emotional problems and her mental illness onto me. Yeah, I had problems. I'm not saying I didn't. I have lots of problems. And some of them are from birth, like my ADHD, my hyperactivity, the fact that I talk real fast, the fact that I'm very hyperactive. That's something I was born with. Yes, absolutely. My addiction is also partly in my blood, but there are factors out of my control that contributed to my addiction. But nobody can force you to be an addict. They can abuse you, they can hit you, they can drink around you, but that's not a decision that they're making for you. But putting drugs into your child's body against his will, giving him extra Epicac, forcing pills down his throat, putting him in programs and giving them permission if he refuses to take his meds to hold him down and force them into him, that's a big problem. And if you're going to do that, you have to be monitoring the side effects in your child. That wasn't being done at all. So this is what I mean. My father is just blaming this on a different family, on a different child. He looks at me like an orphan from a different family, so it's okay to take all the problems of his wife, his second wife, and just project it onto me. I got my own problems to deal with, and I've dealt with them. I have addiction, I have ADHD. Thanks to all this shit that happened to me, I got PTSD and anxiety. But now I have to clear up the bullshit. Now I got to clear up everything that my mother said about me, I got to clear up all these medical records. I got to straighten them out. I also have to clear up a neurological disorder that started with an overdose in Westford. I have to take bay leaves and acid reflux medication for my esophagus and my stomach. I also still to this day have stomach issues. All the way to back to 10 years old, I had stomach issues. I never knew why. When I was brought to the doctor, they called it acid reflux. They gave me acid reflux medication. But was the doctor told that I was given extra Epicac as a child? Of course not. That information wasn't going to get passed on to the doctor. I had to pass it on. And if they called me a liar or something like that, that made my information null and void. Well, a doctor's only as good as the information you give him. So if my mother is giving him bad information, I'm going to get bad treatments. And I did. And now I have to work extra hard, not only to fix my own problems, my own addiction, my own anxiety, my own PTSD, my own hyperactivity, my own job, my own beliefs of being holy, spiritual, and helping others. I have to make sure that I can't drive. If I drive, I'll be putting animals and people at risk. So for 15 years plus, I've made a decision to wait to drive until the neurological disorder has been treated and my hands, legs, and everything are reconnected in a more seamless way. That's hard when you have somebody working against you. Plus, my father doesn't want to take any responsibility for his actions. He wants to blame other people like me or other families or other agencies for his decisions. Like the fact that I can't get Social Security or I'm having trouble with Social Security has nothing to do with my decisions. I haven't even spoke to Social Security. I have never collected from Social Security. The only problem is what they have on paper. What somebody else collected in my name for is not true. So that is a problem that has to be handled, and it's very difficult. I also have another problem. I got fraudulent medical records. So the stuff that's actually wrong with me is what I'm talking about trying to get better for, and the made up stuff is what they already have documented. That's a big problem, and these are problems with my father's name on it. But is he taking responsibility? Absolutely not. And this is what I'm talking about. Take responsibility for your actions.